What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to an awesome episode of Locked On Badgers. I have a guest today that I am so stoked to talk to, something that I think is going to be really insightful, and we're going to get a lot of great intel today on Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Really do, as always, appreciate everybody tuning in as we talk Badgers, talk football, basketball. We're not going to waste any time today. We're going to get right into it. We got Brian Mason joining the show, Wisconsin's NIL director, somebody that I've really been excited to get on the show. Brian, thank you so much for jumping on.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ryan. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, I start off with this. All the great guests, I've told you this before the show, we're going to run out of time before we run out of questions. But I have some questions from listeners of the show. I have some stuff I'd love to chop up. But I want to start here. Your time at Wisconsin obviously predates NIL. You've been around for a long time in the communication side, football, basketball, did some writing with varsity. How has your life changed since NIL came on board at Wisconsin?
Fairly markedly, I would say. To your point, I've been here at Wisconsin since 2008. Communications and PR is my background. Worked with almost every team we have here in one capacity or another over the years. But the last 12 years or so prior to taking this current role I'm in was working primarily with the football program. So if you rewind to like mid 2020, when the world was sort of upended, it was pretty clear that there was going to be some changes in the NIL legislation, in the NIL marketplace moving forward in the near future. And so we really started taking a hard look at, were we prepared for that? Where would we go as an institution? How would we best support our athletes to be successful in that environment? And then that led to my involvement with a kind of cross-functional administrative team here that was handling all things NIL up until August of last year when I took this job as director of NIL strategy. So to answer your actual question, how's my life changed? In a lot of ways, but in a lot of really good ways. It's, we are absolutely plowing fresh ground here. We are building the plane as we fly. We're writing the playbook as we go down the field. Whatever way you want to state that, those are all true. But I do think it's less the wild, wild west moniker that gets attached to NIL than people probably believe. And we've had a lot of success so far for our student athletes, and I'm really excited about where we can continue to grow and where it goes for them.
And I want to jump into something you just said there, building the plane as you fly it. How close, not an exact number, but how close do you think we are to a finished product from NIL standpoint for Wisconsin? Are there innovative things still coming? Where are we at in that maturity process?
I think we're probably a long way from being fully realized in terms of what NIL will be long-term moving forward. And I think that's less a matter of how we're approaching it internally and more a matter of all the external forces that play a role here. There's, a lot of increasing talk about congressional involvement in NIL and maybe creating some sort of national law. The NCAA landscape is always changing in terms of how it is interpreting and enforcing things in the NIL arena, and other legal challenges that are out there, changes in the marketplace that are out there, things that we have to adapt to. So I don't think we're anywhere close to seeing, this is what NIL is. But I think we're in a pretty stable place relative to, where we were coming up on 2 years ago.
And then with that, you talked a little bit about external forces, right? Obviously, Wisconsin is not going to be in charge of any legislation that comes down, NCAA guidance, Big Ten guidance. Wisconsin plays a part in that, but you are in a sense, I don't want to say victim to larger circumstances, but you are going along with larger circumstances here that are out of your control. Do you feel like, because this has been brought up and I want your take on it, there's been a notion that the big schools have always been, to some degree, playing with a more money, more resources, more facilities, and this is just another way for them to leverage those resources. And in that sense, where does Wisconsin fall kind of in that pecking order?
Sure. Yeah, there's probably some level of truth to if you want to draw like some correlation between schools and how they've been funded, traditionally, and how NIL funding is going. But I think it's worth taking a step back and looking at the fact that NIL really has two different components to it at the moment in the form that it's taken. There is that sort of fan-driven, donor-driven NIL that usually takes the form of funding through a collective, in our case, the Varsity Collective. And then there is the kind of commercial brand deal side of NIL. And I think we're very fortunate here to be in a strong position in terms of both. This is a really strong commercial market for deals. We have a number of companies here that have already gotten involved and found success with NIL. And then we also have a donor base and a fan base that has always been supportive of our student athletes. And whether that was, whether that's funding new facilities, whether that's, funding endowments for scholarships, whether that's helping provide the funding we need as times have changed and we've been able to provide more nutritional services to student athletes or more career development resources to student athletes. Our donors and our fans have always stepped up to help us do that. Where NIL is just a little bit different is that given the regulatory framework, that's not something we can provide student athletes ourselves. That's something where a third party like the Varsity Collective comes in, and we've seen good traction with our fans and our donors supporting the Varsity Collective, and from there supporting our student athletes.
Well, and I think that's a great jumping off point to my next question. This is from Big P, actually, a listener to the show. He says, I'd like to hear how it works, a brief overview. I've had several other people questions along these lines of how can they get involved? You mentioned the Varsity Collective. There's also the UW. There's a lot of different ways to do this. How can fans get involved? And then a follow-on question to that is, I've had fans reach out and say, am I a big enough donor to move the needle? Does it matter if I'm giving $25 a month? Do those things help the collective?
I would answer your second question first. Yes, every dollar counts, and that's not hyperbole. I think that's true here in the NIL space. It's easy to look at a facility project or endowing a scholarship. Those are things that generally have very large price tags and things that not every donor or every fan feels like they can contribute to in a meaningful way. I think with NIL, it's quite the opposite. It's something where every dollar does count, and there are multiple ways to contribute and to get involved in the process. It can be as simple as going to what we call our UW marketplace, which is a forward-facing marketplace run through the Open Doors platform, and you can find any one of our student athletes, pitch them a deal for anything as simple as send me a shout-out video, autograph an item for me, make an appearance at my kid's birthday party. Those types of things that are really easy activations for athletes that can help put dollars in their pocket and can get you something in return. And then there's the collective side, and that's important revenue for students on the NIL front as well. And there are multiple ways to do that. It's a charitable organization, the collective. It's a 501c3, so you can make a philanthropic gift that is tax deductible. And on the other side, the collective has its VC Connect arm, which has monthly membership options, and you can get everything from a $25 monthly membership or a one-time donation on the charitable side. All of those things help, and all those things go to fund NIL opportunities for student athletes.
And we're going to link all of that into our show notes as well. So everyone that's been asking, please go and check it out. One of the cool things and just browsing through it, I've done some of this as well. You talked about the UW marketplace. You can go and look at Braylon Allen and potentially pitch an idea, right? There's no certainly guarantees, but I think that's such a cool new way to utilize NIL that makes a lot of sense from the student athlete's perspective and from a fan's perspective.
Yeah, and that even sets aside the business opportunity that exists, the commercial opportunity. You own a business, and your business could benefit from utilizing a student athlete, making an appearance at an event you're hosting, promoting your business on social media, being part of an ad campaign. All of those things are possible. And when I'm out in the community talking to folks in the business community here in Madison and Dane County in the state, that's something I always want to impress upon them is NIL can be very easy. Like the barrier to entry is pretty low. The cost is not prohibitive in any way. And it's fun. Our student athletes are good at social media. Our student athletes are good at being around your customers who are our fans too. There's a natural place for them to get involved in your marketing activities, and it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be hard, and it can be a lot of fun. So the opportunities are numerous. There's plenty of ways to get involved, which I think sometimes adds to the confusion. Like, how do I do NIL? That can mean a lot of different things. But it's as simple as pitching something on our UW marketplace. Contacting a student athlete directly is also always an option. Or making a contribution to the collective.
I want to ask this because this question comes up a lot too. We talked about this a little off air. Should athletes, the NIL value that they potentially earn, should that be made public? Is that something that's better kept in-house?
I mean, I think if you're talking about, what are the dollar values of deals that they're making, like what are those deals worth? I think we've treated that as their private information. I mean, we talked off air. I gave the example of, there is some level of thought nationally that, student athlete deals should be, the amounts of those dollars should be disclosed for the public to know. And, my point is that doesn't happen in the professional space. Nobody knows what Aaron Rodgers was paid by, for his insurance ads or anything like that. So I don't see that as a need necessarily. We do ask for disclosures from our athletes of the deals they're doing, but that's more for making sure there are no compliance issues, making sure they're not getting into an area where they may affect their eligibility. And also, frankly, having a good grasp on what is happening in the space for our athletes so that we can, one, tailor our programming to help them with, the areas that they're getting involved with in NIL, and two, be able to recruit. We need to be able to talk to recruits about what the NIL opportunity is here. And the best way to do that is to, point to things that are really happening, deals that are really being done, and dollars that our athletes are actually earning. So the disclosure piece is important for us, just to keep an idea of what's happening. But in terms of disclosing the dollars publicly, that's not something I would necessarily be in favor of.
Yeah, and I've said in the past, I actually agree with that as well. I even think it gives you a team a bit of a potential competitive advantage or disadvantage if everybody knows what some other players potentially making. You might be able to go in and offer more in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. I want to finish this segment with this question here. This is from T Badger, and he just simply asks, "Who determines players' value?" I want to kind of break this into two parts. Like at a high level, is the university working with players to? Certainly some players do have more marketability. Let's say a senior versus a freshman. Is the university working with players in some aspect to determine market value? And then the second part of that is from just a recruiting sales pitch. You mentioned it. You can use this to talk to players coming in the future. Is that something that you're selling as well, that we provide you with a marketplace value? We help in that sense.
I think it's less trying to provide them with value, and it's more trying to help them increase their value. NIL is this really interesting intersection of college athletics, how it's always been. We are here to serve 23 teams, nearly 800 student athletes, and that's our model, right? We are a service-based department that tries to give all of our student athletes all the resources they need to be successful in competition and outside of it. We're running headlong into capitalism here, and because of social following, because of the platform an athlete might have with the number of viewers that watch their competitions, how public they are as a public figure, all those things factor into what a brand is willing to pay to have that student athlete be associated with them. So it's this intersection of, sort of service for all versus capitalism. And some student athletes are going to have higher valuations in the market than others. And that's a reality, and that's okay. That's how the world works. So it's less us trying to determine what those values are. It's more trying to equip them with knowledge and tools to, present themselves better on social media, improve their follower count, improve their engagement numbers, help with the things that brands and marketers are actually looking for in terms of metrics to say, okay, if I work with this student athlete, there's going to be some ROI for me and my business in using them as an endorser. Less so in terms of, I really like student athlete Y. I want to make sure that they get some dollars. Certainly that's happening in the brand space a little bit, but as the market matures and grows, brands and businesses want real ROI for these commercial marketing deals. And that's where it's our place to try to equip the student athletes to get the most out of that marketplace, and less so tell them what they're worth.
All right, that's really well said. All right, coming up, we have to take a quick break for our friends of the show. Coming up, a bunch more with Brian, as much as I can get in. We're going to talk a little bit about how Luke Fickell has changed the landscape. What are some of the biggest challenges Wisconsin has? And I'm going to even ask him what his most painful Wisconsin loss as a member. We did the show the other day. I talked about mine. We're going to get his take on that as well. All coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a very quick break for our friends of the show, our new friends of the show over at Birddogs. Again, sometimes pants, the things you wear can change your lives. I've famously talked about how I struggle at times dressing the part. It's just part of my DNA. Listen, Birddogs, with the versatility, the fit, the stretch, the comfort, they've changed my life in ways where I no longer need to worry, am I going to look good enough and be comfortable? Birddogs has married those two components up and created the most comfortable pants that are versatile. They look good. They're stretchy. They're incredibly comfortable, and they've changed my life. They've sent me some new stuff. I've been able to wear it. I've been able to experience it. And if anybody tells you pants can't change your lives, they've never tried Birddogs on. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, enter your promo code lockedoncollege. They'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. It's incredible. These pants will absolutely change your lives. Get rid of all your nonsense out of your closet and just stock up on Birddogs. Go check it out. Again, birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. Enter promo code lockedoncollege, and they'll throw in a free custom Yeti style tumbler with every single order. All right, I'm going to take we're going to get right back to Brian. I do want to say thank you again for every single person tuning in, all the everydayers. If you're going to be with us tomorrow, we have another recruiting show with Brian White, the Southeastern Scout. And then we got Rajiv and Justin coming up on a listener-friendly show. We're going to talk about Big Ten expansion. All that's coming up later this week. But first, let's get back to Brian Mason. And Brian, once again, thank you so much for tuning into the show. I wanted to ask you about Luke Fickell. This was another question we had. Luke Fickell coming in. This is from ZB75. How has NIL changed since a Luke Fickell hire, and how important was NIL to attract Luke Fickell to Wisconsin?
That's a great question. I don't know that NIL has changed all that much necessarily since Coach Fickell's arrived. Honestly, I think his view of NIL is very well aligned with the view that we had here prior to his arrival, which was that it's something that we should lean into heavily. It's something we should go all in on. It's something that we should support the same way we try to give our student athletes all the tools in the weight room, right? We want the best equipment, we want the best strength coaches, but they've got to go lift the weights, right? They've got to go get the gains. Similar to NIL, we want to equip the student athletes here with all the opportunity that we can find. We want to equip them with all the resources to maximize those opportunities and try to do something that elevates all of our student athletes. And that's Coach Fickell's approach. He wants NIL to lift his entire locker room. He wants it to be something that can benefit every guy on the roster. So that's really not a change from where we were before. I would say, I think, the energy and the excitement around what Coach Fickell and his staff have brought has helped energize people to, really get behind the idea of supporting NIL through the Varsity Collective specifically, but just in general. I think the attention on our program and the excitement around it has helped, kind of lift the value you asked about a moment ago. I think it's kind of in probably an immeasurable way lifted the value of our student athletes on the football team. So it's certainly been a huge net positive for us. And then how important was NIL to attract him here? I don't want to speak for Coach Fickell. I'm not sure that I could, but much like in recruiting, NIL is a part of every recruiting conversation at this point. And you really have to be in the game to be able to recruit student athletes. You have to have a robust NIL opportunity, is the way that I always phrase it. I think the same went for Coach Fickell to come here. He, if this was a school that from an administrative standpoint was not embracing NIL, was not leaning into how it could benefit the athletes, and was not prepared to support that and resource that, this probably would not have been as attractive a destination for him. And again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that's probably a fair assessment of how he looked at it. We certainly need to be competitive and be, as all in on NIL as we can be.
Well, and speaking of competitive, I probably got 5 different variations of this type of question, right? And I'll just put this one up here. This is from Rajiv, who, if you never listened to the show, Brian, and I don't blame you if you haven't, but Rajiv is the most optimistic Badger fan you will ever meet. We call him Believe with Rajiv. He thinks we're winning a national title in probably 2
Sounds like he's my guy. Okay.
Rajiv's phenomenal, right? And he asks, in a general sense, obviously, and we're not asking for any type of specifics, but what is the gap between the blue blood types, Ohio State, those type of schools, and maybe schools like Wisconsin? There's certainly other schools in that category as well. How much more are they really working with? Is that something you can speak to a little bit?
I can speak to it a little bit. I mean, I think NIL is being approached at every institution a little bit differently. So it's really hard, and it sounds like a cop-out. I understand that. It really is a little bit of apples to oranges. Sometimes there are some schools that, the NIL collective route is really where the bulk of their NIL energy is being spent. And maybe they have multiple collectives. Maybe they have, multiple groups that are trying to raise NIL dollars for their programs that way. Some schools are not embracing collectives at all, or keeping a ton of distance, even more necessarily than others, away from collectives, and don't want any part of that, and are leaning into the commercial opportunities and really putting all of their effort into how do we maximize the commercial deals for athletes. And some schools, frankly, are not embracing NIL at all, whether it's because it could be competitive to fundraising in other areas, whether it's something they don't feel like they can resource properly. I can't speak for them, but it really is different in approach everywhere. And I do spend, some amount of time speaking to colleagues and people in positions similar to mine around the country. And a lot of the opportunities and a lot of the challenges that we all face are kind of universal. We're much more alike than you might expect. Ohio State specifically, because it's called out there. My counterpart at Ohio State, I think, does a great job, and they've done a great job of leaning into the commercial space, and that's a similar way to how we've approached NIL. So it's hard to answer that question in terms of like, what is the gap and how much more are they really working with? Because there's a lot of BS in this space, frankly, and not a lot of hard numbers or clarity around what schools are doing or what the collectives or other groups supporting them are doing. So a little bit of what you hear, in fact, a lot of what you hear, I would say to take with a grain of salt. I'm obviously biased because I sit in this chair, but I feel like what we're doing is very competitive. I feel like the way that we have been fortunate to have the Varsity Collective be run and seed funded and operating currently by some alumni who have our best interests and the best interests of our student athletes at the core of what they're doing is important. Not all schools can say that. The fact that our corporate partners have decided to lean into NIL and see the value in that's been very beneficial for our student athletes. So I feel very good about the place that we're in. Like we said off the top, there's no way that this is anywhere close to optimized. And every day I'm in meetings trying to figure out how we can continue to grow and improve the opportunity for our student athletes and the resources for our athletes so that our coaches can go out and recruit and be successful in that space. But I feel good about where we're at.
And I want to lean into that because you mentioned former alumni helping, obviously Joe Thomas heavily involved among others. This is a question from Badger Gator, and he asks, I don't actually have the question in the queue, but are any former alumni involved in fundraising? Obviously, Joe Thomas has been very prominent with Varsity Collective in the podcast, but is that a big theme for Wisconsin as well, former alumni getting involved?
I think in terms of being kind of champions for NIL or brand ambassadors for the Varsity Collective, yes. In terms of like contributing or going out and fundraising to some degree, yeah, but we're not asking Joe to go out and make all the asks and that sort of thing. So I think the alumni involvement where it's really been strong is, frankly, I have more emails and LinkedIn messages than I can answer from student athlete alumni who are interested in helping provide insights to our athletes or provide financial literacy programming or former pros who are interested in helping them navigate. Boy, I wish I knew this about endorsements before I got to the league. That's where the alumni engagement's been really strong. And I know on the Varsity Collective side, it's similar. They've done a really great job of tapping into the kind of non-athlete UW alumni and developing some really strong programming for our athletes about, how to maximize their social media platforms, what they need to watch for in contracts, the necessity of paying taxes and what that looks like, because that's new ground for our athletes. That's where I've really been excited about the alumni involvement, is their desire to step up and help our athletes navigate this and make the most of it.
Well, I think that speaks to the culture too of Wisconsin. Wisconsin has always had that type of culture in the locker room. A couple more questions then. Again, we say this about the great guests. We always run out of time before questions, but a couple more quick ones here. This is from Badger Gator asking, does the collective plan on any type of endowment type fund to ensure that you have some type of stream of money or steady stream of money for players?
Yeah, I don't want to speak for them. I'm sure they would be very happy to establish an endowment that was sort of sufficient, self-sustaining. I would say that's probably future state at this point. That's one point that I always make about the Varsity Collective is, we're really excited about what they have done for our student athletes. I mean, they've really only been operational since last September. They've done deals with over 200 athletes from 10 or 11 sports. So the work they've done has been really great, but it requires an ongoing commitment or ongoing need for resources, an ongoing commitment to keep funding it. So while it's done a lot of good work, the collective needs continued support to be able to continue that work.
This one's from Justin Julka. Biggest struggle so far in terms of NIL? Biggest thing that you guys are still working to tackle or haven't quite figured out potentially?
I would say, honestly, the biggest struggle is trying to close the education gap on what NIL is, what it means in college sports, what it means here at Wisconsin, how we're approaching things. All the questions that your listeners are posting today, none of them are questions that I don't get on an almost daily basis. And so that's been the biggest challenge, I think, is, our student athletes need education, our coaches and staff need education, our donors and fans need education, the business community needs education, and where my time and time of others that I work with, where we prioritize those groups is hard, because everybody needs exposure to information on what NIL is and where we're going. And it's been a matter of, okay, well, what group do we work on educating first? And that has been a challenge, and that's an ongoing challenge. I mean, I think we've done a fair amount for our student athletes. I don't think we could ever do enough education for our student athletes on some of these topics.
That's a great answer. Two more very quick questions. I promise we'll get you out of here. The first one is, in 5 years, in 10 years, what do you see as fundamentally the biggest change that we're going to see from NIL across NCAA, not just Wisconsin, but big picture?
Honestly, I think, the fact that it won't necessarily be so newsworthy anymore, probably it will be the biggest change, that it'll just become part of the landscape. I know there's a lot of talk out there about, okay, well, there's the prospect of student athletes becoming employees at some point on the horizon, or if something like that were to come to pass, then maybe NIL doesn't exist anymore. And I don't think so. I think no matter what the status of student athletes is, their platform, their position, their association with a powerful brand like ours, like Wisconsin, really gives them value in the marketplace and gives them value to businesses and brands. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. I mean, no matter what the landscape looks like, athletes and sports are valuable properties to marketers. And I don't see that changing in this state. Athletes carry an incredible amount of currency in the marketing space. When you talk about, whoever the stars of the Packers are, you talk about Giannis, you talk about Christian Yelich. Well, now our student athletes at Wisconsin are part of that ecosystem. And the Motion W, means a lot to people in this state. And the success of our programs means a lot to people in this state. And our student athletes mean a lot to people in the state. And brands know that and want to be attached to that. And so I only see the opportunity for NIL growing as time goes by, for student athletes from all sports, from all backgrounds, all levels of success, you name it. I think everybody has a story. Marketers want to tap into stories, and student athletes, generally speaking, all have really interesting, great stories to tell that can help brands meet their marketing goals. So I'm excited to see where it goes, but I don't think it's going away. I think it's going to continue to grow, and I think it's going to just become commonplace.
Yeah, I think that's probably well said too. People are going to stop. It's going to stop becoming a novelty. It's just part of the landscape. So final question here. I did a show a couple days ago. My most painful Badger losses as a fan. I know I don't even mean to bring it up, but as fans, we can kind of come together, right? At least we share the pain. I brought up the national title loss to Duke, the Final Four loss to Kentucky, the Michigan State Hail Mary game. Two more that made my list was the 2017 Ohio State Big Ten title game, which cost Wisconsin a playoff chance, and the 59-0 Big Ten title game against Ohio State, which personally still haunts my memories. What game or two, and I mean, you don't have to say this is my ultimate worst loss as a Badger fan, but what game or two stick out to you as I just can't get over the fact that we lost that?
The 2015 national championship game is is the one probably at the top of the list. I mean, to go from the high of that national semifinal win over Kentucky, knowing we had a team that was a national championship caliber team. I mean, knocking on the door, the way that game played out, that one sits with you. We were this, you're this close. So that one for sure. The Michigan State 2011 is on the list for sure. That was pretty gut wrenching. I felt terrible because the next year, BTN Show The Journey came in and interviewed Jared Aberderis. Looking back at the game, we played him in 2012, and I felt so bad. I don't know how many times Abby had to watch that clip of that play over and over and over again.
He's at the goal line.
So I'll never forgive myself for putting him in that spot of doing that interview. So that one sticks out for sure. And then, for me, the 2017 Big Ten championship game in football, painful. It's great. It was a great team, a great opportunity. And then the Rose Bowl in 2019. I mean, there was a lot of great players on that team that I really wanted to see cap their careers with that moment on that stage. That and the fact that I'd been to 3 Rose Bowls and yet to win one, and now 4 and yet to win one. That one hurts a little bit too, just because of the number of ways we probably could have won that game, but instead lost that game.
Yeah, I apologize for ending this interview in such a downer.
That's okay. I mean, I've been here a long time. For all of the heartbreaking losses, that's great. That comes with the territory. That's part of being a fan. It's part of working in this space. Because on the other side, we've had all of these incredible highs that I would never trade for anything. So if the cost of all of the good is some of the bad, that's part of the job. That comes with the territory. And for me, as long as our athletes walk out of here after their careers remembering all the good stuff, and that's not what sticks with them for the rest of their careers, and so often it's not, then I'm good. I can move on too.
Heck yeah. No, that's a great way to end this one. He is Brian Mason, Wisconsin's Director of NIL Strategy. Thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to link all the collective and UW, all that on our show notes so people can go in and find it. Hopefully this gives them a little clarity as well in ways that they can contribute and continue these efforts. If we do another show, if I'm lucky enough to get you on again, we'll talk about our favorite Badger wins.
There you go. I like that.
Okay. Let's do it. Brian, thank you so much. Any final words, anything else that you would just like to tell Badger faithful that may be interested in, anything that maybe I left out or missed out on?
No, I think you covered it. Like I said, the questions, I appreciate all the questions. They're common questions. Those would all be in an FAQ. So I'm glad we had a chance to answer them as best as I could. Some of them are, kind of hard to answer, frankly. But in reality, I just, I'm really excited for what NIL has done for our athletes and where we can continue to go with it. I think it's truly something that can be an advantage for us here at Wisconsin, and I'm excited to be part of that. And I hone in on that question that was asked about, does my $25 matter? Does my contribution matter? And absolutely it matters. The support that we can get for our athletes in the NIL space is important, and it's to be competitive and get into those championship moments that we just talked about, some of the good stuff, to get onto that stage, to get in those moments, it requires us here having a full offering to student athletes to make this an exciting place, a place that they want to come. And so making sure that our players and student athletes are taken care of and have the best NIL opportunity possible, that's going to continue to allow us to convince future student athletes that Wisconsin is the place for them. So really encourage everyone to continue supporting our athletes in NIL and thank them for the support they've shown so far.
Heck yeah, that's a great way to end it. Brian Mason, thank you so much for everybody tuning in. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Badgers. We'll be back tomorrow on Wisconsin, and let's go.